yet I've been able to overcome some challenges in life and turn those things into positives. And as a matter of fact, when I talk about the time that I got arrested, and I was working at Morrison Cafeteria, and I left work one night. I had a couple of napkins in my back pocket that I used in the dish room where I worked as handkerchiefs, and got stopped by some police officers, and they didn't like the way the dialogue went in questioning of me, and so they arrested me for stealing the napkins, and went to jail, and of course had to eventually go to court, and went through that process. But let me just say, sometimes we think that we've been subjected to the worst thing that could have happened to us, and that turned out to be maybe one of the best things that could have happened to me, because after having been arrested, I wanted to become a police officer, and certainly I was not going to be able to come after having been arrested. But I had, because I had been arrested, one of the African American police officers intervened and took me up to see the mayor, and told him my story, and the mayor was Lou Ritter at the time. Marvin Young was the officer, and Lou Ritter heard my story, got inspired, went down and almost threatened the Civil Service Administration to allow me to take the test, and they allowed me to do so. And as Dr. Hodo read, I ended up being a historical sheriff, not just in Jacksonville, but in the state of Florida. So that ordeal turned out to be a blessing, because I can tell you at that time in history, I could have been one of those individuals who passed the test, and they were certainly limiting the number of African Americans they wanted to hire as police officers, and they could have come back and said, I didn't pass. But because the mayor was overseeing the process, they didn't, and they probably couldn't have said that. And I was able to do what I had to do and what I've been able to do. And when I say what I had to do, I think by divine ordinance, I've been able to do what I've been able to do. So I thank you for that introduction, Dr. Hodo. And let me say to you all, this Conference of Minority Transportation Officials, the Jacksonville chapter, I want to commend you all as well, because as I look at your history, chapter having come online the last 20 years, when it comes to transportation in the city of Jacksonville, you have a stellar record when we're talking about minority representation. And, you know, as we look at the transportation entities in this city, Transportation Authority, land, air, aviation, and the ports, you actually have minority representation running two of them now, and the third, there's a history. John Clark was actually the CEO of that one at one time, and of course the Transportation Authority here, the city, Mike Blaylock, and of course Nat Ford, and of course Eric Green at the port. So when you look at the Jacksonville chapter, you all have been a model for the other chapters, and I would suggest somebody hear that story. I probably, if I'm one of you all, I couldn't go talk to another chapter without bringing that up or writing that in my speech. and certainly would be inspirational to them. Racism in this country, it's alive and well. But I will say to you, we've come a long way. Have we come as far as we could have? Probably not, because it's been a journey, and the journey continues, and it's weaved in our society at every level. And Dr. Hodo talked about employment. She talked about the criminal justice system. When you look at those things, you see that we are lagging behind. I think we've come to a point in history with the incident that occurred to George Floyd, where we have mobilized not only the conscience of this country, but the countries of the world. And we have, of course, a number of individuals who have realized that some of the things that African Americans have been complaining about over the years, and people have probably convinced a lot of these people that they just complaining, they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and they're using that as an excuse. Now they get an opportunity through social media and cameras on telephones and videos to see an African American actually murdered with a law enforcement officer's knee on his neck, with that African American begging for his life, and 3 other police officers standing around. The police officer that had the knee on his neck was so casual about it, he actually had his hands in his pocket. That was an example of where we are in this country. But again, I think by divine order that we're going to come out of this having moved further down the line as it relates to equality. I sometimes question if we will ever get to this whole notion of equality, but I do think that when we talk about having been freed from slavery and at the end of the Civil War in 1865, and I know the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863, and after then, of course, we hit about a 10-year stretch, 10 or 12-year stretch where we were actually doing pretty well. Had people in Congress, had people in state legislature, African Americans. And then, of course, we had Jim Crow re-emerge after 1877. And we went downhill. But we've come back to some degree. We've come back with Supreme Court ruling of separate but equal being outlawed. Come back with affirmative action. We've come back with voting rights. But there's still a lot of work to be done. And ladies and gentlemen, you are in leadership positions. You are in positions that you can build on this legacy that I talked about earlier in the area of transportation. Now, you got to be bold. You got to be courageous. And you got to be prepared to do a good job. When I was elected sheriff, one of the things that occurred to me was, Lord, I can't mess this up. Because if I mess this up, then it probably would never be another sheriff of color elected in Florida. Well, since my election, we've had Sheriff Gadsden County, Leon County, Orange County, Clay County, and we do have another up in the area. It might be in the Key West area, maybe. But we've had some African American sheriffs, and what I would say is, because when I was elected, I was somewhat concerned about that. So concerned about that, I think that I was somewhat restrained in how I was governing. And I was running out every morning to get the newspaper to see what they said about me. But then it hit me. The Lord laid it on my heart to do what I had been doing to get there. And I thought about that, and I said, I'm not going to worry about the newspaper anymore. I'm going to do the job like I had been trained to do the job, and I'm going to do it with the best intent, energy, and with all the resources I have available to me. Now, my first note to you is that the Lord gives us all a gift. We have unique abilities. We are strong in some things, and we're not so good in some things. I know some of you will say, I'm not the smartest person in the world. Some of you might say, I can't run as fast as someone else. I can't jump as high as someone else. But let me just say, you have some strong points somewhere. Now, the first thought that I want to put in your head is, you don't have to.
Elected. It would be one of my first orders of business.
You're going to have hard enough.
Change the text.
Know that you are not the smartest person. So, I say to you, do what I call an objective self-assessment of yourself. And once you do that, then you know what you're going to need and get the resources around you. And I'm going to say to you, get you a person around you who can be a big help to you. And I'm going to give you some characteristics I want them to have. If you got a pen, you might want to write them down. First, you want to get somebody around you that's a creditable person. Because if they're not creditable, people are going to see that you are not exactly associating yourself with the right people. Get yourself a person, the same person, of course, who has the second characteristic of competence. Make certain they're smart. Get the person around you who has courage. Courage to tell you what you need to know, what you need to hear, tell you that suit don't look good on you, or maybe you need to do something with your appearance. They're going to have to tell you some things that you might not want to hear. Get you somebody around you who's going to also be confidential. Whatever is said between you, stay between you. Whatever is said stays there. Get somebody around you got common sense. And get you somebody around you who has some connection to you. Might be a friend, a neighbor, a significant other, a wife or a husband. And be that person that you bounce things off of. Because I can tell you, sometimes two people can look at the same thing and see something totally different. But you got to be smart enough to know if you don't know the answer, you got the courage to say, either I don't know or go to somebody and find the answer. You have greatness in you, but you got to be smart enough to let it manifest itself. In addition to that, I often use the example of Abraham Lincoln. There's going to be some times you're going to have to do some things that the Lord lay on your heart, and it's going to take courage to do it. Think about Abraham Lincoln coming in one morning, gathering up his cabinet, and saying to his cabinet, you know what, guys, and it was probably all guys at that time, I had this vision. I think I'm going to free the slaves. Now, do you think his cabinet said, oh yeah, Abe, that's a good idea. We were thinking the same thing. We were hoping you would come to that conclusion. But he was probably sitting there alone. But you know what? We sit here today, a distinguished people, having overcome slavery and with great accomplishments and the possibility of greatness all around us because of that. You, as a transportation potential manager or current manager, I say, whatever you are doing, do it well enough to leave a legacy. A legacy that would leave people talking about you. A legacy that will leave a footprint in the dust that will stand the test of a breeze. You can do it. Make a difference. I think that you're going to meet some challenges, and those challenges are going to test you. But I want to leave you with another note, that if you stretch yourself, if you reach for greatness, there are going to be some times that you're going to fall short. I didn't say might, I said you are going to. But what I want you to do is to develop a up attitude and keep on pushing. I can tell you right now, I did run for mayor. I know that you all remember that. And I didn't get elected. But let me tell you what happened. After I didn't get elected, the mayor that did get elected came to me and asked me to serve on his transition team. That is unheard of. I hadn't heard that happen before, nor have I heard it happen since. But that was courageous on his part. And you know, even in a heated mayoral race, I conducted myself in a way that he was encouraged to do that. So I would say to you, if you don't remember anything else I say, you remember this. Someone is always watching. They're watching you. And I want you to always conduct yourself in a way where when people talk about you, when you're not around and they're going to talk about you, you determine what they say based on the way you conducted yourself. Because here's what I'm going to say to you. You're going to get the benefit of conversations that happen about you that you don't even know happen. And if the conversation goes a certain way, you're going to lose some things that you don't know you could have gotten because of conversations that happen out of your presence. You have greatness wrote all over you. I want you to have the courage to prepare yourself as well as you can prepare yourself. Get the supporting cast around you that can help you be the best that you can be, and then go and leave a legacy. Now, Dr. Hodo also talked about the criminal justice system and the disparities in the criminal justice system. I would think it's almost criminal if I don't at least mention that to you or say something about it. I do believe that reforms necessary for us to get to a point where mothers and aunts and sisters and wives are not worried when their male leave the house, when their males leave the house, because of a possible deadly confrontation with law enforcement. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. But it has progressed to that point. So we do need law enforcement reforms in the profession. So when there's an opportunity for that to happen, I would like for you all to have the courage to step up and be a part of that. I think that police officers arrest African Americans more frequently than they arrest whites. I think prosecutors recommend and prosecute more African Americans in cases and situations more than they do whites under the same circumstances. And I think judges impose more time in the sentencing of blacks more than they do whites under the same circumstances. But I don't think all of them are racist, where there might be some bad ones, some racists. I think it's implicit bias. I think it's one of those situations where they are unaware, unconsciously doing it. So one of those reforms will be classes, in-service training on implicit bias for police officers, prosecutors, and judges. So the criminal justice system would be balanced, would be fair for everybody. So we can get there, but I want you to have the courage to speak up, say what needs to be said, say it for the right reasons, and make a difference. And leave that legacy that I talked about, where people will be talking about you like we talk about now the John Clarks and Mike Blaylocks and the Nat Fords and Eric Greens. I think you can do it. I'm convinced that you can do it. But remember what I said. Someone is always watching. So, give them a picture. Leave a thought in their mind that they would say, that's the person I want to follow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Glover. That was amazing. I really appreciate your candor and your frankness. When you talked about the disparity and recognizing that African Americans are more prone to be arrested, as well as prosecutors are more prone to recommend prosecution, and that we do know that there is a disparity in sentencing, even with judges. As you stated that, I mean, statistically, we know it to be true, and I agree with you. I believe that most police do go into the police force with good intentions. I don't think that the vast majority of them are racist. But I guess I struggle often, and maybe many of us do, with them not calling out the maybe 2 or 3% that are racist, that are bad, and just basically letting others know so that they can be removed from those positions. Because just like minority groups, the police are being judged as a group. And again, we know that most of them go into it with the best intentions, you know, but as you stated, that implicit bias, it is very real. And oftentimes I think people don't want to acknowledge it, but reality is if we're human, we all have biases. So I think that's very important. One question I wanted to ask you was, I just can't.
Dr. Hodo, let me expand on that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
You did hit some points of the internal workings of law enforcement. What you have amongst police officers is a culture of a kind of us and them culture, and that culture simply means that, look, we go out there and we face dangers, and we run to the danger while citizens are running away from it. So we got to stay together, and we got to make certain we look out for each other. But they also extend that looking out for each other, and to the extent that they know some of these officers are biased, some of these officers are prejudiced, but they don't tell upper management about it. They don't tell the command staff about it because they are keeping that secret amongst themselves because they don't want to be perceived as informers and that kind of thing. That's going to have to change. That would be like a doctor knowing that a person who also has the distinction of being a doctor, but he doesn't know how to operate on the heart, but he's trying to operate on the heart, and people are dying, and the other doctor won't say anything about it. That's a danger in that. So the officers amongst themselves are going to have to do a better job, as well as some of the upper management who know who some of these officers are. So yeah, we're going to have to do better with that.
I agree, sir. I totally agree. I saw one question come through, but I wanted to ask you one myself, because you mentioned it. How do you handle being, the stress? Because I've been, a person that has been the only person of color in the faculty in the department, and the stress of that, and the reality of people basically, looking at us as representation for our entire ethnicity or race. How do we deal with the stress of being the only or the first while recognizing that we are representing the entire group, even though reality is we're not all the same. We have different social economic classes, educational levels and all that. Like, how did you deal with that level of stress? As you said, recognize you were the first African-American sheriff in Jacksonville's history, and knowing that everyone's watching you. So how did you deal with that?
That's a very, very good question. I think one of the things that I did when I first took office, when we get in powerful positions or positions of influence, too often we have a lot of our friends, people that we know, they come to us. They want jobs. They want you to do this for them, and you want them to do that, and that kind of thing. But you want to make certain that you're able to not put people in positions that they are not going to be able to not just perform at a margin level, but do extremely well. So you want to get you a supporting cast around you of people who are competent, who are loyal to you, and who are going to be that support mechanism that's going to help you get a comfort level that's going to allow you to be able to navigate that close scrutiny. And I'm going to say this to you. When I was sheriff, I always thought that I had a core of people out there who were just waiting for me to mess up. So, and to be honest with you, I never shook that the whole time I was sheriff. So I had to make certain that I conducted myself like someone was always watching and someone was always checking. And I can tell you, I think that the opposing side sent temptations my way that they were just waiting for me to fail the test. But I was able to realize that I'm going to do the right thing even if no one is watching. That's how you deal with it. Just know that you're going to do the right thing.
Yeah, and I like when you talked about the spirituality component and just recognizing that there is greatness in us, and recognizing, and that's every individual. that you really don't want to be necessarily the smartest person in the room, but you want to surround yourself with people who have that credibility, that confidence, and the courage, as you indicated, to tell you the truth. To say, Dr. Glover, I don't know if that's necessarily the best move, and to be able to have the confidentiality of someone and, like you said, practice common sense, and make those connections. We do have a question from someone as a transportation professional. They're asking, how do they combat systemic racism in their delivery of services? Or better yet, how do we consider inclusion and equity into our delivery of services?
First, let me say this. We are living in a society. This is to the questioner. We're living in a society where we are a minority. The majority has the wealth in this country. They have the governance in this country, and they are the social constructs in this country. So whatever we do, we are under scrutiny. What I have adopted in my lifestyle is that I go beyond expectation. I come in earlier, I stay later. If the requirement is 10, I'm going to do 20. And the other thing is, it's very important, and I want to go back to, you're going to have to say no to some people. You're going to have to be able to look people in the eye, tell them you are not doing what you're supposed to do. And you tell them, if you continue this conduct, then I'm going to have to make some modifications, which might mean transfer, which might mean demotion, which might mean firing, but you want to make certain that you are able to do that. We sometimes fail to do that because of friendships, relationships, and that kind of thing. But you want to put people in positions that they not only will be able to do the job, but do the job well and distinguish themselves. You also want to put people in position that's going to be an asset to the company. And you also want to put people in a job that makes you look good. Because if they make you look good, that helps you, your image, and it helps people to trust you.
I could not agree anymore. I'm over here shaking my head. Yes, yes, yes. I definitely agree with you. I think that it is imperative that you surround yourself with people who are very competent. I think that in the African American community, we're all, and if we're not aware, that we need to go above and beyond, as you said, because of the credibility and recognizing that we are a minority group in America. And socially, economically, and politically, we are not the majority, or nor are we in charge of these things. Another question came through, Dr. Glover, and the question is, what are the challenges with minorities being in more management or leadership positions in law enforcement? And maybe I should rephrase that. Are there challenges in regards to minorities being in leadership and management positions within law enforcement?
Yeah. We are fortunate in the city. I want to take a minute to give the sheriff a shout out, because I did this without his knowledge. I called some of my sources down at the sheriff's office, and I was asking how was we faring in the upper level of management positions, and the person did an analogy, and he wrote back and told me that 32% of our upper level, staff level managers in the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, African Americans. That's as high as I ever heard it being. I mean, that's really, really high. And so it's getting better. What I would want, and I'm so glad you asked this question, because one of the things that I find when we get in upper level positions, we kind of find ourselves in a position where we are trying to conform so hard to what is going on that we don't exactly say anything when we should. If you'll give me 3 minutes, I would like to tell this story. I was sent a young man who was just put on this board, and it was a board, and it was a very influential board, and he apparently had gone to somebody, and they sent him to me to talk to, and he was saying that he was on the board and how distinguished he felt and that kind of thing, but he was saying that he didn't get to say much, and I knew exactly what he was feeling. He was feeling like, number one, he does not want to be saying things that's going to make the others look at him with some kind of question and some kind of disdain. But so I said to him, and I'll just make this quick, I said to him, I said, now let me get this straight. You've been appointed to a board, and I said, do you think the people that appointed you knew you were black? Oh, yeah, they did. I said, okay, good. I said, now, you're sitting on the board, and the board probably looking for your input. And because they are probably going out and saying, we got an African American on our board, so we are addressing African American interests, but you're not saying anything. And I said, and then the public, they wrote up in the newspaper that you were on the board. So African Americans in this community are feeling a little more comfortable you are on the board. So I said, if that's the case, you are betraying all of those people, and you're only serving yourself because you are comfortable saying nothing. And I'll never forget the look on his face and what he said in response. He said, I never looked at it like that. And I think from that day, I probably, to this day, he went back and he was more assertive and took more risk and was more of an asset to the board. So sometimes, Dr. Hodo, we are in positions, but we feel so uncomfortable, so intimidated that all we want to do is be there, but we don't want to do the things that's necessary to move the needle. So that's what I talk about, the courage to do the right thing.
And in sociology, when we talk about that, because it's exactly what you just stated, we have imposter syndrome. Sometimes because there are so few of us on boards or in leadership roles, we begin to kind of question whether we should be there, should we say anything? We don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. But I have found, just as you said, oftentimes that they're specifically looking for us because they do want the input and that perspective of the Black American lived experience. And so I think that really goes well with what you just said, is that oftentimes they're very intentional with good intents to gain an understanding and a perspective outside of the authority or dominant group that we see in America.
Very well put.
Thank you, sir. The next question, Ms. Thompson told me to tell you that she wants to know kind of what would be our next steps to attack the implicit racism or bias that we see, in our society as well as in our private lives. I've been in situations, just to give examples, to an experienced bias in regards to being made to feel like I should not be there, or I've had someone say, grab their purse and grab it tightly when I walk by, and that type of bias with the assumption of the criminality that seems to be placed upon our beautiful brown and black skin tones. So how do we basically, like, what do you think some of our next steps are to attack this bias that we see in America? We know is definitely implicit, and to me in the South sometimes is rather explicit.
Well, I think law enforcement, and I'm going to say criminal justice reform is our time now. See, with the George Floyd incident, we got criminal justice on the front burner, and we need to address that. Now, in Jacksonville, Florida, we're doing pretty well. I know some people don't want to recognize this, but think about what we've been able to do in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm going to start off with we have an African American who's head of the Duval County school system. We've had an African American sheriff, historic. We've had an African American mayor here in Jacksonville. We have an African American who's head of Jacksonville Transportation Authority. We have an African American who's head of the Jacksonville Port Authority. We have an African American who's head of U.F. Shands Hospital. We have an African American who's head of the Police and Fire Pension Fund, and that's a $2 billion pension fund. We have an African American who's head of all of the city YMCA. We have an African American female who had one of the largest suburban hospitals in the area. That's Baptist South. And when we look at those kinds of, and an African American who's head of one of the most largest and prestigious law firms in the city, Rogers Towers. With that kind of leadership, with that kind of, in this kind of an environment where a community would be so advanced that they would put African American competence level in those positions, we can probably do anything that needs to be done in the city of Jacksonville, because we have a community here of people who are willing to look at what need to be done and listen to and have that participation. And we should take advantage of that. We also have a historic situation in City Council. We have, out of 19 City Council, we have 6 City Council people. And I think that's about as many as we've ever had. So we really should take this opportunity. And incidentally, the chair of the school board is also African American, and that African American just happened to have been the only city council member who served 2 terms as president of the city council, 2 full terms. So we have some good synergy here in Jacksonville, and I think this city is poised for greatness. So all we have to do is pull together the resources, put the challenges on the table, and make certain we pull together and solve them.
That was a phenomenal answer. Thank you. And I did not know all that. I am a transplant to Jacksonville. So I just learned, well, I learned a lot from your whole, conversation, but I did not know all of those heads. And that is pretty phenomenal. So I just have one last question, and then I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Mr. McLaughlin, to Christopher. When I think of often, I see the majority, some people in the majority, using the police as their personal security. And when I say that, I think about the situation in Central Park, where the Caucasian woman knew exactly what to say to the African American male who was bird watching, and she did not have her dog on the leash. And he asked her to leash her dog because he was bird watching, which is totally okay. And she said, well, I'm going to call the police and I'm going to tell them that a black man is I'm afraid and that you're approaching me. And, how can we address those type of issues besides exposing them via the media? Because it seems like people know exactly what to say. They know how to utilize the police against us as everyday citizens who are doing nothing but just trying to live our best life just like they are.
Well, again, here in Jacksonville, we're kind of unique. When I was sheriff, one of the things I was noticing, you just set up a scenario where a police officer responding that's not in the right frame of mind will not even ask the right questions or just make some assumptions there that could cause problems later on. But one of the things I did when I was sheriff, I raised the educational requirement for police officers from high school diploma to college degree, and got a little flack for doing that, and they started saying, well, you're not going to get African Americans if you do that. First thing, I didn't believe that, but the other thing was I wanted to have a better educated police officer being confronted with challenges just like you just brought up. Because I think if a person has a college degree and they've been exposed to the social sciences and the humanities and some of those college level courses, and they've been in an environment where they had close relationships with different diversities of humans, then they will be more comfortable and receptive to responding to situations like that. So I think now with the type police officers that's being hired, I think that in Jacksonville we probably have a better class of officer that will be responding to a situation like that and would be able to see through some of those things that might have not have been so obvious if they had, less of a formal education.
I agree. And I agree that exposure is so important. And I think it's important that we recognize, though, that America, we are kind of resegregating and very hyper segregated in regards to living conditions. But that's also attributed to social economic status, which I know as a social scientist has a direct correlation to race and ethnicity. So we continue to kind of be on the bottom. But that interaction, I totally agree, is so imperative in the educational component, because then they're more aware. So Dr. Glover, I thank you so much. At this time, I want to go ahead and turn it back over to the president of COMTO and allow him to take over. And I think that we have some other people who would like to make some comments. So Mr. McLaughlin, if you will go ahead and chime in, sir.
Right.
Macklin, I'm sorry,
Macklin. It's okay.
Sorry, Christopher. I just call you Christopher.
Okay, then well, I'm gonna call you Dr. Tammy. Thank you, Dr.
That's
Tammy.
fine.
Okay, but before I introduce JTA CEO Nat for further remarks, guys, I just want to tell you that I really, really enjoyed this dialogue. I truly believe in what you said, Dr. Glover, about the journey continues and that we will come out of this as it relates to equality. And you also stated something that was very key to me. We gotta be bold and courageous, and don't worry about the newspaper and the media. So made some other comments about get someone around you that's credible and competent and courageous to tell you what you need to know. Also leave a legacy. And then another key thing that stuck to me was when you stated someone is always watching. So I just want to thank you for sharing your thoughts and your experience. And I will always remember this meeting. Thank you to Dr. Tammy as well for sharing potent information that will also help us move forward. So now I would like to now introduce JTA CEO, a visionary, clear focus, fearless, and a key leader and supporter of COMTO. CEO JTA, Mr. Nat Ford.
Hey, Chris, thank you, President Macklin. I really appreciate that introduction. And I just have to commend you and our local COMTO chapter, your leadership there. You guys are doing a fantastic job. And considering the environment we're in with this pandemic, to be able to hold a virtual meeting and then to be able to have someone of Dr. Glover's stature actually address this group. And as you can see, I was very dialed in because Dr. Glover is one of my mentors here in Jacksonville. And he's just been such a great source of, I think, guidance and a voice of, I guess, support for my leadership at the JTA. And I think a lot of the things that we've accomplished is because he was always over those lunches that he and I would have, whispering in my ear about left turns and right turns and making the right decisions. It goes without saying, he's had a remarkable career, a legacy of success here in this community. And so when I first arrived, he was one of the folks that I immediately sought out, and he graciously accepted, being that voice in my head as I made a lot of the decisions I need to make here. I think he sets a very high bar for all of us to aspire to as it relates to leadership, particularly as African Americans or people of color. You know, the challenges that he obviously faced as the first sheriff here in African American sheriff here in Florida, and those experiences are invaluable. And I don't know, we might be able to talk him into writing a leadership book one of these days, so that we'd be able to share his passion, share his vision. And then I think Chris, you summed it up. I actually took notes too. Credible, competence, and courage. And we got to remember those 3 C's as we go forward. And I just want to, again, personally share my thanks and appreciation to his leadership here in this community. He is highly respected, and I'm honored to consider him a personal friend and advisor. And I got one more person I want to give a quick shout out to, and that's another mentor that is living in our community, someone that from a transportation leadership perspective has a wealth of knowledge and expertise, and that's Bob Prince. And Bob remembers me when I was about yay high growing up in this industry. And he was one of those folks similar to Dr. Glover that, at 12 o'clock midnight, when you can't sleep because you got a tough decision to make, you could pick up the phone and call them, and they'll be right there for you. And so I've been blessed with those 2 great leaders to be part of my cadre, my kitchen cabinet in terms of this industry. And I would suggest that each and every one of you try to find that Dr. Glover, that Bob Prince in your career that can help guide you in terms of those decisions, those challenging decisions and career moves that you need to make. So with that, thank you, Chris, for giving me the opportunity to say a few comments. And it's good to see all of you. And even if it's virtual, it's great to see all of you in this COMTO virtual meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. And I think it would be right to give Bob Prince the opportunity to share a few words. If those who don't know, in regards to Bob Prince, he was the first African-American general manager of the 4th largest multimodal transportation agency in the United States, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, I believe it's MBTA, and has been a key leader of COMTO for many, many years now. So without further ado, Bob Prince, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chris. And, I just want to say I want to mirror what Nat has already talked about. And I want to thank you for, once again, providing an education. It's the ripe old age and I'm still learning. And this has been another learning experience. And it also validates some of the things that, my core values, Dr. Glover's 6 C's, were important because the kitchen cabinet that Nat talks about is extremely important for your survival. And so all I can say is, congratulations to you, Chris, and your board. Congratulations to Nat Ford. He's just a remarkable leader and a friend. And Dr. Hodo, you continue to amaze me, and I'm so happy that you're part of the COMTO family. And I hope that Dr. Glover does take Nat's advice and write that manual, that book, because it's your legacy and you want to be able to pass that along. And I firmly believe that we need to tell our story, and it's extremely important. So with that, I do say thank you. And once again, I salute this type of forum.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Prince, and actually Mr. Ford, again, for your comments. Thank everyone. Thank you again for supporting the COMTO mission. That concludes today's meeting. Just want to thank everyone again, and I will see everyone at our next meeting, which is on Wednesday, September 16th, 2020. I will see you later.